нас сегодня очень важный гость Елена Михас, научный сотрудник Центра изучения языков и культур университета Джеймса, правильно?
Yes.
И приглашенный исследователь университета Висконсинского университета Милуоки. Елена провела несколько месяцев в Коряке, и вот буквально из первых уст готова поделиться с нами уникальным данным о корякском языке.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm ready to share all the experiences and the materials that I've collected while I was in Kamchatka. And I'd like also to acknowledge with gratitude the help, the assistance which was provided to me by Misha Daniels, so in the organization of this lecture, and Oleg Volkov as well. So what I'm going to talk about, the project which is called Phonological Documentation of Rekinniki Koryak. The project goals are to describe the language's phonological inventory and phonotactics, and the narrow goal of the project is to investigate the phonetic properties of the pathetic vowel, its phonemic status, and its role in syllabification. But today I'm going to talk about the following issues. So I'm going to discuss the distinct phonotactic constraints on the distribution of the lateral consonant in Rekinniki Koryak. And I will be talking about my data, my methods, community background, about the phonological inventory of Rekinniki Koryak, about its syllable structure. And the bulk of the lecture will be devoted to the patterning of the lateral consonant in answers and codas. Talking about my data, so I have about 10 hours of audio and video data collected during the 16-week field trip in Tymla, Sora, Karaga, and Petropavlovsk-Kamchatka. I also have additional materials which were shared with me about 5 hours by the Tymla Evangelical Church and by the Kamchatka State Center of Folklore. And I also use, of course, secondary sources because there have been lots of people who, at some points, they studied correct dialects and the Alluta language. So they also definitely were useful in my preparation for this trip. With regard to my methods, so what I did actually when I was working, I did elicitation, observation, making audio and video recordings of citation, speech, and connected discourse, making transcriptions of texts, and conducting a comparative analysis of Rekinniki Koryak nouns and other counterparts, and their counterparts in Alluta proper. Well, I had only two data providers from Kultushina, and the rest of our team, there were about 15 people who contributed to this project this year. So they were from Tymla, so they are currently their residences in Tymla and Asora, and a few people also are residing right now in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatka. And I also use the protein audacity software in my analysis because it's an instrumental study, so I really needed to use this software to make measurements of formant frequencies and also to measure duration of vowels, etc., etc. With regard to my theoretical assumptions, well, you have actually to keep it in mind that everything that I say today, it has to be treated with caution because it's really just, the first step. Well, I hope it will be the step in the right direction, but yet it's really all hypothetical. So I'm really only beginning to do the work, and I hope that in the future, of course, it will be really a beautiful project. But at this point, at this stage, this is just, the initial point. So at least my basic assumption, what I've done and what I started with is that the phonetic representations of the forms tested across the dialects of Alluta proper are taken here as a baseline for the analysis. So that's point number one. And number two, I rely on the citation speech samples rather than on the recordings of connected speech in my instrumental measurements. And also a very important point, I believe, is speakers' judgments also about the vowels, about the phonological units of their language. And I believe that we really have to approach those judgments with respect. So I am more inclined really to listen to the speakers than, say, to use, sort of theoretical assumptions, or maybe to use particular theories to accommodate a certain view. So I think that we probably should start first with the data and with the speaker's judgments about what they think about the sound system of their language. And also another thing, so I just warned you, I said that you have to treat whatever I say here with caution. So that's the caveat. And the second point also that I would like to say is that it's a limited study, definitely, because I only investigated the nouns. So this is the map. If you look at the map, so this is the old settlement of those folks with whom I've been working. So this is the empty river, Pustaya Reka, and so this was actually the ancestral settlement of Pustaretsk clan, so the Pustaretsk clan. And a little bit further away in this direction this is the coast of the Okhotsk Sea. There is also the territory of the Podkagermaya clan. And so these two clans, so this is the dialect actually that I've been trying to describe. So, and if you look at the entire map of Kamchatka, of the Kamchatka Peninsula, so this is where this dot over there, so this yellow dot, this is where the ancestral settlement was located. So that's the Rekinniki site, but unfortunately because they were displaced, and I will be talking a little bit about this in 1981, so they don't have any opportunity to go back to their territory, ancestral territory. Right now they are displaced, they are residing on the coast right now, on the coast of the Bering Sea, right across on the other side of the peninsula. So what, speaking of their background, they are fishermen and they are sea mammal hunters. And I already mentioned two major clans, and these are very close-knit communities. So they, the main principle of their existence is cultivating, maintaining their clan relations, and they're very supportive of each other. And I think that that's probably one of the factors why they still continue to speak the language. And if you are curious, to know more about their background, probably a good starting point will be Krasheninikov's описание земли российской, because actually Stepan Krasheninnikov actually mentioned these two clans, and he was speaking about them as разбойники, because they were absolutely militant towards the Russian explorers, and they didn't want to participate in any dealings, any negotiations. So these people were quite resilient and militant, quite aggressive in their attitudes towards the Russian explorers and merchants as well. And pretty much, well, at least what I was able to get from my communication with the folks with whom I've been working, that they preferred self-isolation to maybe even better life. So that was their choice, but unfortunately, this, or maybe, I don't know, it was of course maybe even better for them that they were exposed to more civilization, but this self-isolation was broken at some point, and so they, in 1931, they said that they actually welcomed the first cruise ship, so some goods were delivered to their communities, and so since that moment, since 1931, so their full integration into the structures also, the Soviet state began, so, and that was their journey, kind of towards more integration into the Russian culture. Right now there are about 26 speakers left, and I work with about 15 speakers. The language. And I would say also that the Timlat Evangelical Protestant Church remains the last bastion where basically all communication is done in the language. And I ask also the speakers to count their ethnic base. It's about 180 people. So they counted about 20 families, extended families, with the total number of people, 180. And also another important also point, that's what also kind of is an inspirational point for me, is that they have a very positive view of their language. Which means that, say, if there is a team, a good team of native speakers who are willing to collaborate with an outside linguist, so it might be really a very good project really for, say, for an outside linguist or maybe a team of linguists. And it will be mutually beneficial really to work together with those people who love their language and they would like to do something about documenting the language and even developing their own orthography. And so that's kind of a sore point here, a thorn. I would say that they complain always about the absence of their own writing conventions, their own writing system. It doesn't exist. However, there are multiple naive orthographies, so they develop their own orthographies and they use them in their Bible translations. So there is, again, there is kind of very felicitous moment to start the documentation project. So you have already people who are willing to do it, they're willing to participate in this project, and they already have even their own samples, their own naive orthographies to start with. And I also, again, I would like to mention this point, a word of caution again, that still we are investigating all these issues, theoretical issues. And in particular, what interests me is the onsets. So I would like really to know more, and I don't think I know as much as I should about the range of combinatorial possibilities in complex onsets. I'm also keenly interested in knowing more about the nuclei. So what segment actually can be a syllable nuclei? So if we actually use Rekinniki as the starting point of our analysis, and also this preliminary evidence that I have at this point, the evidence shows that a range of segments function as syllabifying elements, both sonorants and obstruents. Also, I would like to know more about codas. Are there any restrictions on simple and complex codas? About stress, what are the rules of stress assignment? Is it sensitive to syllable weight? In particular, I'm interested in knowing more about this. And actually, probably the most important point is the vowel epenthesis phenomena. So I would like really to do even a separate study on this subject. So does the schwa differ from lexical vowels phonetically, duration and formant values in particular? I would like to know and to measure maybe many times and conduct those instrumental studies to know more about this. Does the schwa have a fixed vowel quality, or does it depend on the phonological context? Does it interact with stress assignment? How does it behave in loan words? There are lots of Russian loan words in this language. And do speakers notice these vowels? And that's probably another very important point here again. So what are their judgments about these vowels? And of course, probably the most global issue is the diagnostics of the minimal phonological word. So what are the phonotactic constraints apart from stress which determine the shape and size of the phonological word and the permitted segment combinations within it? So at this point, what I see is there are 17 consonants and some of them, for example, they are under discussion, under investigation. So, for example, the phonemic status of the glottal stop is disputed by some scholars. And if you look at the fricative layer, so the dentalveolar S, it's pretty much, I only was able to find it in Russian loans, for example, sol, salt. It's marginally tested. And another also, the epiglottal also is marginally tested. So this is the glottal approximant. But it's really, there is nothing really remarkable about this inventory. And vowel inventory, there are 6 vowels. However, again, there are some issues here, and I already mentioned that the vowel epemphasis really remains an intriguing issue, I would say, but it's a challenging issue, definitely. So there is really an absence of instrumental studies. Really, we have to conduct very methodical and very thorough studies of this vowel. Well, at least my first take on it is that it seems that there are 2 schwas, 2 vowels here. That we have one which is an extra short excrescent vowel, which disappears in resyllabification. For example, if we look at this word, lhun, it's birch in the singular, and then lhuna, it's birch in the plural. So we see that this final, the extra short vowel, so it disappears. It's a pathetic vowel. So it's some sort of like a prosthetic device. So it's used in order to really bring up the words to the minimal size. So it should be disyllabic. And another vowel is part of the root, and it has longer duration. So this vowel is retained in all word forms. For example, if we look at this word reindeer thigh and mengen, and then the same actually vowel is again there, and mau, reindeer thighs in the plural, so the vowel is still there. And this, of course, is really a challenge, definitely, to describe the syllable structure. So according to Krainovich, and actually I'm inclined to support him on many issues, though probably certain things I would think that although his work is incredibly insightful, considering that it was produced in 1958, and right now we have multiple publications on those languages in North America, also African languages, Berber, where consonants actually, they can be syllabifying, so actually now it's a fact. And I'm sure that when he published his work in 1958, it was a groundbreaking work, but it wasn't really supported by linguists because of this kind of pioneering spirit maybe, and there wasn't really enough at that point evidence, cross-linguistic evidence from other languages. But actually what he was saying and what he saw in 1958, I think is definitely quite visional. So it was a really visionary view and an interesting hypothesis, I think, that can be used at least at this point by those who begin working with the language called Rekinniki Koryak. So anyway, well, we can see that there is this, the first type, V, angan, the second type, VV, oikal. The third type is VC, ankan, and the fourth CV, maka. The fifth CVV, kaingu. The CVC, panka. The CCV, clavo, and here again, well, we can, of course, those consonant clusters, those word initial consonant clusters, we can definitely encounter maybe alternative points of view, and there are actually quite strong schools right now, even say in phonology, those who believe that if we speak about, if we discuss things like optimal syllable size. So obviously we would be more inclined really to believe that the optimal syllable shape will be CV. And those consonant clusters, they just illicit, and so obviously that they should be somehow be broken up. However, again, well, there is an alternative school, and so they believe that actually we do have simple answers with just one consonant. CV would be an example of it, and we can have also complex answers, so with consonant clusters. So there could be probably 2 or maybe even 3 consonants as a combination in the onset and the syllable onset. And so here we have, and I think that Rekinniki argued in his work, he was saying that actually when Koryaks, when they say klavol, but he was actually talking about a different dialect, but in this dialect there is no lateral consonant. Word finally, this word actually is deleted in this particular dialect. But the first syllable, so it would be then CCD, klavol. And the 8th type will be, again, we have this consonant cluster, in the onset, CC, VC, ngarakpo. And the 9th, again, would be probably something that someone could challenge. So this kind of division, this division into these syllable shapes, kai couple. When we have actually the stressed syllable, we'll have the structure CV, CC. So, and again, I believe, well, and I asked my consultants many times, could you just, what are your intuitions? And so I asked them actually to clap even and to clap and to even pronounce, maybe showing by their voice even, so showing the pitch of their voices, so how many actually syllables they could distinguish, they could identify in a word, and every time they would pronounce this word in particular, actually you can say even ball without even kite, because actually it's a compound, so kite means small, and then couple means ball, so it will be the same, always the same and the same, so the same procedure would be repeated. They would vehemently contend that it's just one syllable, so they wouldn't really divide it into any smaller units. And obviously the most intriguing, I would say, would be the question of this, Rekinniki actually identified this as a syllable type, so when you have just one consonant. And an example that he cited was this word cedar nut, nikla. And I will show you the spectra of this word so that we could look actually and see if instrumental studies actually they can support Rekinniki CU, because at that point he didn't have any software. And so now we can really check those hypotheses. So, well, and the final syllable type will be CC. So we have here kumchek. So just as a way of illustrating the point that I just made, so I would like to show you the spectra of this word, nikla, and to play the recording. Yes, if we look even at the spectra, so we could see here, so the nasal, so this is very characteristic, those striations here we see. We also see quite common shape, deformant, we can't really see much here because it's explosive, and the same in the waveform. But then we could see this burst of energy here, so there is this extra short vowel, and if we measure this vowel, and that's what I did using the software, the Proud software, so this vowel can be placed somewhere between this and between O. So it's somewhere here, central vowel. And it's extra short, it has a duration of only 40 milliseconds. So I expressed it by the symbol here, the schwa symbol in the gloss layer. And we also have this extra long L, very energetic. And then the word ends in, again, another extra short vowel. And the duration of this vowel is very comparable to the first schwa. So we see that it's 39 milliseconds. So actually, we can say that the instrumental measurements, they support his view, Rekinniko's view that we have here that one of the syllables actually is just a consonant. Now we're going to talk about, since the focus of the talk is on the lateral proximant, so we're going to talk about the articulation of this lateral proximant. Well, there is nothing really remarkable about this. So it's produced with the raised tongue, with the tip of the tongue being in contact with the alveolar ridge of the upper region of the teeth, with the airstream flowing along both sides of the tongue. And it's a low-intensity consonant. The tongue is often in a neutral position with little or no contact with the other articulator, with the passive articulator. So the alveolar ridge or the upper region of the teeth. And, well, also another point that should be mentioned here is that the articulation and the formant pattern change depending on its position in a word and its position in a syllable. So we are going now to listen to Anna Ivanovna Ivkova. She's going to explain how actually she articulates this sound.
Вот он слово лоло, лоло. Вот она сюда подходит к выдимке. Лолайнен, лолайнен. Она находится лолайнен на уровне вот так вот лежит. Просто лолайнен. Лолайнен немножко вот так вниз и вверх. Лолайнен. Даже не вверх. Лолайнен, лолайнен. Левый — это язык что-то туда-сюда. Понял? Левый касается и опять отскакивает.
Well, what's remarkable about this, how actually conscious the speaker is about the movements during the articulation, the tongue movements, about the articulation of the lateral proximant. So how analytic actually they all are. They are quite conscious of this, and so I would like to kind of to stress the fact that it's really important. We can be, well, this is probably the worst sin, to be arrogant and to treat the speaker's judgments with kind of like with this condescension that, well, we know better. So it's always a good idea, to write down everything that they say and to listen to their advice. Because quite often what we do, we come with our preconceived notions and theories, and we try to prime them. We try to say, well, don't you hear this? Well, maybe that's what actually is happening. And when they say, no, actually it's just the opposite. We say, no, it can't be so. Just the other way around. So I think that probably that's the most, I don't know, from my standpoint, I think that's probably the cornerstone of everything that we do in the field. We have to listen to the native speakers. All right, now we're going to look at onsets, simple onsets. So overall, and I'm talking about L onsets. So I would use the capital L to discuss the lateral approximant. So the structural patterns of L onsets, they closely resemble the ones reported in other neighboring dialects. And the neighboring dialects would be the dialects to the north. So they will be Anapka, the Anapka dialect, and probably even the Aluta proper dialect as well. So what happens is that in simple onsets, for example, those which we see in example 2, Talangan, Hammer, Lolo, breasts, Ulu, sea lion, and Valiva, seal cat. So that's the last one that we are going to listen to. Well, because it's a reduplicated, the base here vowel is reduplicated. It's interesting that after she inserted the epenthetic element here, A, so she actually kind of pauses here, takes her breath, and then she finishes the word. So we can actually see even the reduplicated base, and then we see the second part of it with the elided lateral approximant.
Really, well,
So as you can see, actually L really is a very low energy consonant. You can even see, it can be seen by the second formant that it's quite attenuated here. Well, complex answers, they're quite unremarkable. So they are also observed in other dialects. So we have the preconsonantal O in word initial answers, and it precedes a limited number of obstruents. And what I was able to find at this point only a handful of examples. And again, of course, because my study was limited only to nouns, so, well, you have to keep it in mind. Maybe that's why I didn't really have too many. But yet we can, of course, claim that it's possible. So we have here run, and klon. And here we have the spectra. So as we can see again, so there is germination. The germination of the nasal stop is quite audible, and then there is this extra short vowel at the end. Obviously, it's needed really, it's used as a prosthetic device really to bring up the word to 2 syllables, because that's the phonotactic constraint that I actually observed across all varieties, Koryak varieties, and I'm not sure about the Alut, I think also language has the same phonotactic constraint. And again, speaking about the complex answers, in word initial complex answers, so it's also unremarkable, so it's observed across other dialects. So we have the prevocalic L in word initial answers, but here there are more examples that I was able to collect, because this obstruent sonorant cluster, actually cross-linguistically, it's quite common. And we have more words, for example, plaku, reindeer skin boots. We have klavo, man or husband. But the cluster sonorant, so this is quite marked cross-linguistically. There aren't really too many languages that have these sort of clusters. And the example that I use here is luwe, is notes on the tree branch. So we have. So we can see even here that there is no intervening. So this first, the complex answer. So these first 2 units, segments, sound segments. So we can see that there is no intervening vowel here, pathetic vowel. So the spectra really illustrates it quite well. Now the most interesting part of the talk, and this is something that is really very unique, I would say, even, and it's not observed in other dialects, is L codas. Realization of simple codas in word final syllables. So this is generalization number 1. That this is how I would put it. So it's not really a rule at this point. I don't think that we could probably call it a rule, but at least we could, because again, as I said, we only are speaking of nouns at this point, and so it would be interesting to look also at other parts of speech. But I consciously limited my sample to nouns only, because I thought that, I first I have to investigate something really thoroughly to begin with something, and then maybe make another step and look, kind of extend the range of those lexemes that I'm going to look at. But nouns, obviously, this is the best way really to start when you investigate phonotactic constraints. So what we what I think is happening is that in word final simple codas, the lateral proximant is deleted. And the L deletion is observed in the syllables of the obstruent, vowel, lateral proximant type, where the O is an obstruent and the letter L stands for the lateral proximant. But the L is elided only in singular absolutive, resurfacing in plural forms. For example, here we have, in Aluta, we have katel. In Rekinniki, Koryak, it will be kate, and the plural form would be the same for both varieties. Katelu. Then we have met'al, met'a, met'alo, tau'al, tau'at, tau'alo. And I think I have now enval, enva, envalo, and tikval, tikva, tikvalo. And I have
Chikwa, 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 chikwa.
Now we're going to look at complex codas. So they have the obstruent lateral approximant structure. And I didn't really have too many words here. And also I had with this word, for example, with Morocco, there was one consultant actually. Most of my consultants, they syllabified this word, just broke it into two parts, Morocco. But there was one consultant who actually told me that she sees this, she feels that the word consists of 3 syllables, and so she syllabified it as ma-ro-ku.
We are Morocco.
Yeah, and here, well, she added just we-I means grass, so travяной лук, while back. Kai-kapu.
Kai-kapu, kai-kapu.
And L is retained also in the plural forms as well. Now we're going to look at simple codas in word final syllables of the sonorant and lateral approximant with the intervening epenthetic vowel in between, and then another type, sonorant vowel and lateral approximant type. So here is generalization number 3. In word final unstressed syllables of these two types, the rhyme is articulated as a long or as a diphthongal vowel. Though some actually theoreticians, they believe that it could be a long vowel could be also treated as a diphthong. But some actually make a distinction between a long vowel and a diphthongal vowel. Because in the diphthongal vowel, they argue that these are vowels with different qualities. But what matters is that they are articulated within one single syllable. So what we have here, the combination of the schwa with the lateral approximant is realized as a long central vowel. Is in 7th R, for example, in Alunta it will be mammal. Yeah, the air is pretty high here. This is the alluder. And the plural will be mammal, so l will resurface then in the plural form. And then the second kind of version of this rule is that when a high front or mid-front vowel is followed by the lateral approximant, the first target then retains its frontness, whereas the second target is articulated as a centralized vowel. And here's the word bile, which was the one that Anna Ivanna Ivkova, she used it in her presentation when she was explaining the articulation of the lateral approximant. So it was Lily. And here we can see the alluder version of it. So this is Anatoly Sarokin. probably the most spectacular, I would say, phenomenon here that I'm going now to discuss with you is the realization of quarters in word initial and word medial syllables. So here, I thought that it would be good to formulate a couple of generalizations. And so what I've seen is that the rhymes of word initial answerless syllables with the underlying L quarters appear to be limited to the il and al combinations. And they are illustrated in the examples that I will provide in the next slide. And there are both onsetless syllables and onsetful syllables, but the generalization applies to both of them. And generalization 5, in word initial and word medial syllables, the aluta L quarter is realized as the vowel in Rekinniki. And this vowel is produced within a range of central vowels. So these are the vowels that I was able to measure. So of course I will have to do more fine-grained work to see what actually conditions this variability. So obviously, of course, we have to look at the context, we have to look at the environment, the preceding elements and the elements that follow those underlying quarters. But the range definitely so that they are all centralized. These are all central vowels. So if you look at this, so this is the rhyme and the realization, the phonetic realization of this L coda. So what happens? In Rekinniki Koryak. So we have now the aluta form here, and we have the Rekinniki Koryak. And I'm going to play, so in aluta, for example, it will be il-ak. And in Rekinniki Koryak,
il-ak.
Then gvost in aluta will be al-kap. And in reindeer hide or skin, it will be nalhn in aluta and in the word for raven in aluta will be walla, and in Rekinniki Koryak, when I was talking, well, my last recording that I made in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, it was a speaker actually of a different dialect. He was from Kultushina, so he was from, he is speaking the Aluta dialect. And so when I asked him if he was conscious really of the differences, phonological differences, and well, just globally speaking, just differences even in pronunciation, articulation, so how the speech of Rekinniki Koryak comes across to him, a speaker of a different dialect, and he said, everything goes somewhere down. Explained to me that, they really speak differently. And I think that it happens because of the high frequency of those diphthongs. Because if you go back to Krinovic's work, and he made really comment there. He said that if you look at the lateral proximant, so it's really one of the most frequent sonorants in Koryak varieties. And what happens is in Rekinniki, since they systematically produce those diphthongs, and these diphthongs, the last element, the second element of the diphthong is always a centralized vowel. So obviously it will then create this impression that everything really is going down. So if we look now at medial syllables, the same story. And this pronunciation is retained in all word forms. If we look at the plural forms, so it will be the same, diphthong will be articulated. For example, here we have in aluta, it will be Rekinniki, leg, and in Rekinniki Koryak, or if we look at ear, if we listen to this, Vilong. Lip in aluta, it will be Wamel Kalnun. used Anna Ivanna Ivkavap also used this word, I believe, in her presentation when she was describing the articulation of the lateral consonant. So if we look at if we hear the alluter version of it, so it will be le ulko, and in Rekinniki Koryak, and also I was curious, well, not just, those combinations, L-codas with the preceding lexical vowels, but also with the epenthetic vowels. So I was just curious what will happen. And basically, we can observe the same regularity. Well, the appearance of a centralized vowel. So we have a diphthong with the second segment being a central vowel. So tree bark. In Alut it will be ilkelven, and in Rekinniki Koryak. Or this is the classic word. So the coastal Koryak, coastal dweller. Nemelten, and Rekinniki Koryak. So as you see, so it's really very systematic. So what happens here then poses really quite an interesting question about the classification of those varieties. And I will talk about this in my concluding remarks. But I was curious also how we can test those regularities if we look at reduplicated words, because that's another interesting point. So you look at reduplicated words, you look at loans, just to see if the phonotactic constraints that they extend to this particular phenomena as well. And well, phonologically, the alluter replicated base is usually a CVC unit. So, and it would be probably, schematically, it would be then designated as R. So we have just the repetition, R, R. Sometimes there is an additional epenthetic element inserted. So then we have R, epenthetic, R. And morphologically, then the base is an output. However, in Rekinniki Koryak, this alluter pattern undergoes significant modifications in accordance with the phonotactic constraints. So what happens is that the reduplicated base, CVL, in Rekinniki Koryak undergoes segmental transformation. The word final L coda is deleted, and the il rhyme is realized as a diphthongal vowel. And we will see it actually in our next slide. For example, here we have the word which is already familiar to you. So this word final reduction. So the base, the replicated base will be val or vel, valival, the alluter form, and the Rekinniki form, valiva, sealed at. And the word for thimble, napirstak, we have valivel, and in Rekinniki Koryak, velive. Well, Anna Ivanna, she pronounced the first syllable just with a little bit elongated, velive. But usually it's pronounced just velive. It's just a little bit an emphatic version of it. And the second also pattern that we see here is production of a diphthongal vowel and word final reduction. Again, it's observed also in reduplicated words, so with L codas. So we can see fermented sour fish. So actually this is the traditional meal, kislaya ryba, kisляtina. In the alluter form for it will be will, and the Rekinniki form will be different. So again, there is a diphthong, and then the final, the word final lateral approximant is deleted. And going back to other regularities that we observe when we analyze replicated words with our codas, they also use other technique, because for some reason they don't like to repeat those bases with word final L coders, and so they're really trying to find some loopholes, kind of trying using other techniques to do something else, to produce some other word. And well, simply the simplest way of doing it will be just by adding an epenthetic vowel to the noun root to form a disyllabic word, or by germinating the syllabic L coda and adding the epenthetic vowel. And we can look again at those examples. For example, here we have yil, the base will be yil, and the aluta form will be yil. And the Rekinniki Koryak is yile. So the base requires just that there is this epenthetic vowel, and there is no germination. And the other way of avoiding, of trying to somehow modify this L coda is, rather than producing will, this is what is done in Aluta. So they germinate the L, will. So and then add this pathetic vowel. So we can hear this now.
Will.
And this is probably the last one, just germination plus reduplication. So this is something that speakers comment on it as something which is not really characteristic of the Rekinniki dialect. They say, this word actually we really do not use it. We know that this word exists, but we prefer, there is another, a synonym, kivla. So they're using kivla. So they do not pronounce actually the L is not pronounced here, and so they use another word. Though sometimes this molomol, it's also attested as well. So the concluding remarks are as follows. So what I would like to say here is that the central vowel occurring as the second part of the diphthongs in examples 8 through 10 usually has the duration comparable to that of its first part. So these are lexical vowels that I will go back to those examples. So actually I should probably say 8, 9, because number 10, here I'm using the epenthetic vowel. So anyway, here we can see that the second element, the second segment, the duration of the segment is quite comparable to the segment in the diphthong, to the segment. So each segment is approximately lasts the same amount of time. And another also argument in favor of thinking of it, of this second segment of the diphthong as a vowel which has a phonemic status is that speakers actually are aware of this vowel. So when it's part of a diphthong. And here is a sample which was produced by Alexey Pavlovich Apollon, and he used actually an apostrophe to show that there is a vowel there. But the problem is they don't know how to write it. So they reject this I. They say that I, which is used in the Chakchuvan writing system. Actually this I, the Cyrillic I, is used to designate this epenthetic element. And they say that actually you can't really use it here. It doesn't really reflect anything. We do not really articulate this sound in our language. And so instead, so he chose to use this apostrophe just to show that really there's something happening there. And it's interesting that every time when you ask them to write a word with a diphthong or this kind of sort, so they think and they give quite a bit of thought to that. And so they are at a loss, they don't know what symbol could be used. And so when I suggest that maybe we could use this schwa, so some of them actually adopted even later on the schwa just to show that you can actually write down the vowel. But definitely they feel the need to write it down somehow, but they don't know how it could be done. So they are not just equipped at this moment They don't have their own writing system, and so, but this search for something that would accommodate their needs definitely is on their way. And another also conclusion that I would like to suggest is that this systematic formation of diphthongs with the last segment being a central vowel, which corresponds to the aluta L coda. This is the Rekinniki Koryak specific phonological rule reflecting the diachronic sound change. And so I think that definitely there is something there, so we could use this to reconsider maybe even classification, existing classification of dialects, since some linguists, and I believe it happens because we really do not have enough data, so we then generalize, and we believe that we could then classify particular varieties, certain varieties, just kind of broadly. And what happens is that Rekinniki was classified pretty much as an aluta variety by a number of linguists. But overall, what I would say, what I see is that the Rekinniki variety is definitely distinct from other dialects. So here is the summary. And this table actually what it shows is the patterns 1 through 5. So these are the patterns that we can observe in other dialects. However, 6, 7, and 8, these are distinct patterns, and they are characteristic exclusively only of the Rekinniki Koryak variety. Because I haven't seen, I haven't heard at least what we have at this point, because I worked also with Karaga speakers. I spent some time in Karaga, also with Anapka speakers, and speakers from Kultushina, even those who are to the north. And Timlat also, there are 2 people still left who speak the Timlat variety, and they reside in Timlat. So my impression is, but again, I would like to emphasize the point that this is quite preliminary, that this is the only community, the only native community that uses these rules, those phonetic constraints. They are really specific, they are unique to this particular variety. And I would like to acknowledge with gratitude the contribution of the following native speakers: Nina Naumovna Nesterova, Maria Mironovna Умья, Дарья Николаевна Танинов, Татьяна Васильевна Котовынина, Татьяна Ивановна Тинакьяв, Нойкавья Людмила Иннокентьевна, Анатолий Алексеевич Нестеров, Афанасий Алексеевич Нестеров, Дарья Степановна Ятты, Мария Егоровна Нутавье, Ульяна Иосифовна Катгынина, Мария Николаевна Аполлон, Ульяна Николаевна Лихтылин, Алексей Павлович Аполлон, Лена Кондратьевна Аполлон, Анатолий Анатольевич Сорокин, Сергей Григорьевич Йока and Anna Ivanovna Ivkova. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. It was very interesting. I have a question about glottal stop. When you ask them about their thoughts about simplification, and about the structure of this word, how do they treat glottal stop? Do they treat it in uniform way, differently?
That's an excellent question. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm totally intrigued by the way they see the glottal stop. They hear it and write it, especially when they write it. Actually, they say that, I think, well, at least what I got from their descriptions, the way they describe it, so they say that this is sort of an on-glide. It's an on-glide. And only what also happens, it appears only when the syllable is stressed. So say the generalization that is valid for the aluta variety, well, I'm sure that you are familiar, right? If you are interested in Koryak varieties and aluta, the aluta language, so you're probably familiar with Kibrik, Kadzasov, and Muravyova, right? Grammatica, and there are also other publications. So they are making an assumption, and they provide a lot of data and evidence in their publications that the glottal stop appears pretty much in word initial positions, before a vowel. And also it's used also to break up so-called illicit kind of combinations when two vowels come together. So it's not really the case in Rekinniki Koryak. And my impression also is that we will probably have really to do more instrumental studies and look, because they were, I believe that it was one of the, either Korsakov or it was Melnikov in his dissertation 1940. So he was actually, there was a hypothesis and they were thinking that maybe what we are dealing with, these are not really, we have maybe to look at a series of glottalized vowels rather than we are talking about glottal stuff as a segment. But again, we really have to use instrumental studies to be more sure and more certain. But yes, I definitely noticed that there is something different going on with the glottal stuff, the distribution of glottal stuff and its production and the way they think about it in comparison with the Alluta-proper dialect or language. So we don't really have the classification really set in stone. So we are still arguing and disputing, and so these things are still being discussed in academia. Any other questions? Yes.
When you have told about law in word final position, there were the word кислятина, and it was produced two different ways. How can we explain it?
Yeah, another excellent question. Yeah, I'm delighted. Yes, yeah. Well, the whole point about doing studies of this sort.
Sorry, can you turn back to this slide where it was...
Sure.
Yeah.
This one, right? So we have here, yes, will, and we have willer. So the whole thing about those varieties is that we have variability. So we can encounter one form, we can encounter another form. And they actually emphasize that. And even, when I ask them about those kind of discrepancies, well, they respond that, well, it's normal. Well, even in Russian, some people pronounce it one way, some people pronounce this word in a different way. But what I think is, it just, the creativity of language. So the speakers, they use all resources and all techniques really to come up with certain ways of observing the phonotectic constraints. And so maybe that's just a way of even expressing their creativity. However, I think that probably the basic response here would be that variability. So that's something that we always observe in any language that we describe.
Can it be morphological change with replicated stems?
Well, that's what exactly I think, because we are talking about the interface, yes, between the phonology and morphology, certainly, right. These things, they are definitely inseparable, but at this point, I probably will need more studies, more, even, I would think this connected speech even to see what's going on, really, if we are going to describe morphological derivation, so, and means that they use. So at this point, I don't think that I have enough data, really, to give you a solid, substantiated response at this point. But what I think that a language documenter, that's why actually I provide it too, though I know that it might look really strange, but I think that we should really sweep things under the rug and say, well, here is the generalization, this is what I have. And so all the words, they follow this pattern. Well, that's not true. That won't be true probably for any language. We would find some kind of clashing things happening, and we may not be able even to explain them. But what I think that we should be at least content with the point that we observe a variety of means used in the language. But definitely we have to look more into this, yes, to explain, yes, so why it's happening. But functionally, from a functional point of view, this kind of variety definitely is okay. Yes, it happens all the time. Yes?
Yeah, and I remembered one more thing about доказав Gibrick description and in the description of a Luther and in the description of Koryak by Zhukova, they somehow distinguish palatalized L and non-palatalized L.
Yes.
They have some discussion about the phonemic status of palatalized segments.
Yes.
In this variety, it did some difference and some. Yes, so are L and palatalized L different, and what is the distribution of this?
Absolutely, of course. Yes.
So
Yes.
and all that happens to non-palatalized L and codas, it also happened, no?
No, it doesn't. No, that's the beauty of it. That this, for example, that's another thing also that they use. They palatalize the L. So, and I could have mentioned, of course, this, but say ikra, caviar. So in the Palana dialect, it will be Clelm, if I'm not mistaken. I could look it up if you are interested. But definitely, the what I remember for sure is that they use the regular lateral approximant in the word caviar in the Palana dialect. And these folks, they actually palatalized it. So now they pronounce the word caviar, because when you use the palatalized version, so you don't really have to comply with the phonotactic constraint. You don't have really to produce a diphthong then. So, and the word then for caviar is klalno, la, klalle. Because normally the combination of o and ng, it produces, and with the, of course, preceding lexical vowel, then it produces a diphthong. So it's a classical combination. And here, because it's palatalized, goes lo. Yeah, so you don't have it really. Yes, it's, well, at least, on the surface, of course, I really did, it's just a cursory look at it. Yes, I looked at the distribution, didn't really research it profoundly, but definitely no. The behavior of the palatal, no, we don't really have any sort of phonotactics working here, so the behavior is totally different. It's just a regular consonant, really. Well, what I would like to say is that we are beginning this project, and so if you are interested in joining it, because we need a lot of people working together, and so if you are willing to do it, so you can definitely let me know.
I had a question about simplification, actually. They brought actually two questions.
Yes.
First is about some more. Can you explain how you get some evidence for their syllable boundary? Because you had all that words are simplified. So, and the next question was actually about the next slide. I think you said that you have that geminated l and n and all that, and so you treat it as they're not as geminated, but you split it to the
Yes.
coda and concept.
Yes.
Do you have any phonological evidence for that, or what is? Because my feeling was that we have something like, is it geminated under the stress or any other thing? Because it's, do you have something that that gemination is there, not between the last syllable and penultimate syllable? So that would
Well, it's just actually a series of questions here.
yeah,
I will try. Yes, I will try to respond to it. Well, the first again, the premise, as I mentioned already, and I'm sorry if I belabor the point, but I always start with the speaker's judgments. I always ask them to tell me if they feel how many parts are in the word, and so in a word, and so say they either clap their hands or they just try to show it with their feet or whatever. So they tap on the table, so it's quite common that I ask them to tap those syllables, and so they devote quite a bit of time to that, so when they're trying really to identify these syllables. Because I believe that we have to start with the speaker's intuitions. So that's the first thing. Of course, apart from that, so we have also to look at the stress also, so the stress pattern. And normally, if you look at the spectra, the waveform, and the pitch also, that's instrumental studies, they are quite suggestive of the syllabic also divisions, because normally pitch shows you really the peak, the syllable peak, and you can quite easily identify really those syllables. So that's the second method that I'm using. And of course the third, we are also trying, of course, to theorize. So we are trying really to think of those patterns, just looking even at the whole sample of what I have. So how the stressed syllables, normally they have the nucleus, it has, and it's cross-linguistically really. So the theory actually, cross-linguistic theory tells us that we could look for those cues, specific cues, the stressed syllables, so that we could divide it really into syllables. So it would have, the nucleus would have a longer duration, say, than the syllable which is with the nucleus which is unstressed. So that's another also. So this kind of cross-linguistic evidence also is quite helpful in making those divisions. But again, it's something that is definitely a challenging issue. And I think that every Russian linguist that worked on Koryak varieties also emphasized this. So drawing those syllable boundaries, it remains a challenge. And I think that without more substantial studies, it would be really very difficult really to arrive at a conclusion, at a definite conclusion at this point. So, and another thing also I think that would be difficult to do to designate those syllable boundaries. We can't really do it unless we resolve the issue of the vowel epenthesis phenomena in those languages. Because either we are really then joining the forces with Muravyova, Kadzasov, and other folks, also Kibrik, because they believe that the optimal syllable shape is CV. And so, and what you have just alternation. So you have the rhythmic pattern of stressed, unstressed syllables, because actually there is not just one stress, there is also just primary and there is secondary stress, of course, and we definitely observe it, including reduplicated also words, so that the peaks, there is another peak, of course, stress peak. Or we can actually accept the view of Krainovich, so that we could maybe play here with and think about also evidence coming from other languages, verbal languages and Native American languages as well, because they also, for example, Silesian languages, quite similar. There's patterns that we have in Koryak varieties. They are also found in Native American languages. And it's not really anything exceptional here. But, of course, what is really challenging, and they are not really certain about where to draw syllable boundaries. Even those folks who really, they are prominent phonologists, so they've studied, and Native American languages, they are really quite well studied. So they are still arguing. So there is really no consensus on it. So how to do it, what is the best way really to analyze words of this kind of, sort of like this nekla. So what do you do with it? So do you really use this epenthetic vowel, so how you really treat it? So is it something, or you are really just attributing the syllabifying rule to the consonant? So where will you draw the boundary, or you don't draw it at all? So you just have then one word, nikla. Is it just one that word with just two epenthetic, prosthetic vowels? So that's, that's, or you just insert, though you don't really have evidence for that. So if you look.
Because he was actually, for me, it's a problem that you need the boundaries, because are not arguing nothing about the number of syllables. So you
Mhm.
can know about the number of syllables, but you not also divide
Yes,
and make
yes,
this division.
yes.
And
I know, yeah.
my point is actually that this division is not really any. You have no. In most cases, you have no any clear evidence for any phonological, any phonetic evidence for boundary. You have some evidence for syllable itself, but not of that boundary itself.
But yet, speakers are quite aware of those syllable boundaries.
Okay, but you who believes this, not me.
Yeah. So, and again, I think that we probably have to listen to them. And, well, just think, what we can do, how we can accommodate. So what is the best way really of doing it? So that we could put together those things like speakers' judgments and cross-linguistic evidence, because actually they do draw syllable boundaries. So both native speakers and some linguists as well. But again, well, even if you look up the Wikipedia page, so it might be even useful reading for you. So that it's quite a challenging question. Yes, this what can be really the nucleus and how you draw the syllable boundaries. So these things are definitely quite complex.
I asked a question about the pharyngeal consonant that you have.
Mhm.
You said that it's really rare.
Yes,
But,
yes.
You said also that there are some different sounds that are borrowing, that S is borrowing from Russian, but it's, I hope, it's not the borrowing from Russian, that pharyngeal one. So where is its appear?
Well, this sound, and I think that might be something that it's a result maybe of their self-isolation, or maybe, well, I don't know yet at this point. But there is really discrepancies in what speakers say about the articulation of this sound. Some speakers, it's like, this variability in the production of those centralized vowels. And the same with the production of this, well, some call it epiglottal, proximate, pharyngeal. But the point is that there is definitely some pattern there. The neighboring, the Chukchuan dialect. So it seems like because they are quite close to Chukchuan speakers, Penjensky Rayon. So I think that maybe some of the speakers, they are kind of, they absorbed the variety from Penjensky Rayon. On the other hand, most recently, I would say, because only there are a few speakers who really use this. For example, in the word goose. So I have only a few items really recorded with this sound. So that's the only, and maybe there was another one that I have in my, but not really too many. So, and other speakers know, if I ask them, because I was also interested to see what the distribution of this particular approximant is, and it seems like that they deny actually even articulating it or hearing it among their own members of their family.
And the last question maybe from me. For me, it's really strange to see that we have something like le, but not re. So you have trill noises. You have no vocalized trill, but I don't know anything about Koryak and some other languages, but
Which one?
about trill, is there a vocalized trill? You have now in your table, but it's actually strange for me that you have le, but you have no re or something like that. So the question is, what do you have to that? Because as I remember, there is a vocalization backward.
Okay.
Is actually
Yes, yes.
So
Palatalized
what-
serious, right? No, I didn't find it. I know that there are gaps which you can't really explain. But I didn't really have it in my sample. Okay. Yeah, that's also something that I didn't hear. No, I didn't hear it.
So when you have that vocalization, you have the usual around there, the usual tree there.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Mhm. No, I no, I didn't see any. Didn't hear any of this. Yeah, but gaps they exist, and it's not really uncommon. Yeah. So you don't really have to have the pattern that might be observed in other languages. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.